The markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Raine Musñgi. Catch up with us on Newsfeed Business. China has retaliated against Trump's tariffs. China slapped tariffs on U.S. imports Tuesday in a swift response to new U.S. duties on Chinese goods. The move renewed a trade war between the world's top two economies, even as President Donald Trump offered reprieves to Mexico and Canada. Additional 10% tariffs across all Chinese imports into the U.S. came into effect on midnight Tuesday in the U.S. after Trump repeatedly warned Beijing it was not doing enough to halt the flow of illicit drugs into the United States. Within minutes, China's finance ministry said it would impose levies of 15% for U.S. coal and LNG and 10% for crude oil, farm equipment, and some autos. The new tariffs on U.S. exports will start on February 10th. Separately, China's Commerce Ministry and its Customs Administration said it is imposing export controls on tungsten, tellurium, ruthenium, molybdenum, and ruthenium-related items to safeguard national security interests. China controls much of the world's supply of such rare earths that are critical for the clean energy transition. China also said it was starting an anti-monopoly investigation in Alphabet's Google, while including both PVH Corp, the holding company for brands including Calvin Klein, and U.S. biotechnology company Illumina on its unreliable entities list. A White House spokesperson said Trump would not be speaking with Chinese President Xi Jinping until later in the week. In the West, though, Donald Trump's trade war on pause. His tariffs on Canadian imports postponed for at least 30 days in return for concessions on border and crime enforcement. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada has committed to creating the post of a special czar to combat the smuggling of fentanyl and ensure monitoring of their border with the U.S. Trump had threatened to impose tariffs on Canadian imports by February 4th unless Ottawa crack down on drug smuggling and the flow of illegal migrants. As for Trump, he says he's very pleased with the initial outcome of his negotiations with Canada, but he notes it's not yet certain if a final economic deal will be reached. Well, U.S. President Trump also postponed new tariffs on Mexico for 1 month. This after Mexico agreed to reinforce its northern border by sending 10,000 National Guard members. The agreement also includes a U.S. commitment to prevent trafficking of high-powered weapons to Mexico. Trump and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum spoke on the phone hours before the new tariffs were set to take effect.
Pues que habíamos estado trabajando juntos en migración.
It was a good conversation, with a framework of respect. That is the news we have for you. He asked me how long I wanted to pause tariffs. I said forever. He told me, how much time? I told him a month. I'm sure that during this month we'll be able to deliver good results for his people and the people of Mexico. I told him that we've been working together on migration, and that we've had good results. We always work respecting and protecting human rights. We talked on our common interest in reducing fentanyl trafficking from Mexico to the United States. And other drugs as well, not just fentanyl.
Trump now says the U.S. and Mexico will use a month-long suspension to engage in further talks.
President Sheinbaum is a woman. I like her very much. We've had good relationships, but we have to stop fentanyl from coming in, whether I like somebody or not, and we have to stop the illegal aliens from coming in. I think we've lost 200,000 people on average a year for many years, much higher than the 100,000. Could be even closer to 300,000. And they've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country. They have a big incentive to do. Other than that, we've agreed to talk and consider various other things. We haven't agreed on tariffs yet.
Well, U.S. President Trump also said on Monday he had spoken with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and would do so again within the day. Canada had earlier announced retaliatory tariffs.
Canada is very tough. They're very, very tough to do business with, and we can't let them take advantage of the U.S. We're going to have another call at 3 o'clock. We had a call this morning. It was a pretty good call, I'd say. And we're going to have a big negotiation with Mexico. I'll be involved too, and President Sheinbaum will be involved to see whether or not we can work something out on the tariffs. China will be speaking to China probably over the next 24 hours.
On fentanyl in China, President Trump.
We don't want fentanyl coming into our country. Now, we had another big thing, speaking of China. China's involved with the Panama Canal. They won't be for long, and that's the way it has to be. To other places.
Well, Asian shares gave up gains and U.S. futures dipped as markets turned risk off after China announced new tariffs on U.S. exports. Earlier in the day, stocks across Asia-Pacific rebounded after the S&P 500 trimmed most of its slide on Monday. But earlier in the day, President Donald Trump had delayed tariffs on Mexico and Canada for a month and said he'd hold further talks with China. The optimism was reflected in gains in Chinese stocks listed in Hong Kong. It jumped almost 4%. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 was trading 1.6% higher before dropping. South Korea's Kospi rose 1.7%, while in Australia, the ASX 200 was up 0.3%. In the currency markets Tuesday, the Canadian dollar and Mexican peso held steady after soaring high following news of the tariff delays. The dollar strengthened against every group of 10 peer. Traders, though, were more concerned that U.S.-China talks will fail to avert tariffs being levied, with traders bidding up the dollar against its group of 10 peers. In other markets Tuesday, West Texas Intermediate oil fell early in Tuesday's session after its biggest advance in more than 2 weeks. Gold jumped to record highs amid the trade war fears and was holding near those levels a day later. 4 of the 5 major cryptocurrencies rose on Monday after some concerns over Trump's move subsided. ING analysts say Trump's tariffs would cover almost half of all U.S. imports and would require the United States to more than double its own manufacturing output to cover the gap, an unfeasible task in the near term. Meanwhile, the European Union wants a constructive dialogue with the U.S., but is ready to respond firmly if it is unfairly targeted by the new Trump administration. After a meeting with EU leaders, European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen said on Monday they choose to prioritize the relationship with the U.S. and their commitments in aid in other parts of the world.
When targeted, unfairly or arbitrarily, the European Union will respond firmly. This weekend, we witnessed how steep tariffs were imposed on Canada and Mexico. Those tariffs raise business costs, they harm workers and consumers, they create unnecessary economic disruption and drive inflation. We do not see much good coming out of this. So we prioritize productive discussions and engage early. At the same time, the European Union remains also steadfast in its multilateral commitments, be it from our development aid to our climate targets.
Talk about aid. Democratic lawmakers joined a protest outside USAID offices in Washington, D.C. Monday to rally against the Trump administration's efforts to shut down the foreign aid agency. Most USAID staffers were told not to report to the agency's headquarters in Washington on Monday and to work remotely. That's according to a copy of an email to personnel reviewed by Reuters. Billionaire Elon Musk, who is heading U.S. President Trump's drive to shrink the federal government, gave an update on the effort early Monday, saying work is underway to shut down the U.S. Foreign Aid Agency, USAID. A senior White House official said on Monday that Trump is considering merging the U.S. Agency for International Development with the State Department. Lawmakers like Gerald Connolly, Don Beyer, and Jamie Raskin spoke out from outside the agency's building, alongside Senators Chris Van Hollen and Christopher Murphy.
Prison guards overseeing thousands of ISIS combatants in Syria walked off the job after their pay was frozen until a waiver was thrown together after the fact. Let me say that again. Prisoner guards overseeing thousands of ISIS combatants walked off the job.
So this has nothing to do with making the U.S. government more efficient and everything to do with aiding and abetting our adversaries around the world. If you doubt that for a moment, listen to what the former president and Putin crony Medvedev just put out on X. Quote, smart move by Elon Musk, referring to shutting down AID, former Russian president and stooge of Vladimir Putin. This is also a huge gift to the PRC.
Elon Musk makes billions of dollars based off of his business with China. And China is cheering at this action today. There is no question that the billionaire class trying to take over our government right now is doing it based on self-interest. Their belief that if they can make us weaker in the world, if they can elevate their business partners all around the world, that they will gain the benefit. But there's another reason this is happening. They're shuttering agencies and sending employees home in order to create the illusion that they're saving money in order to do what? Pass a giant tax cut for billionaires and corporations.
You name it, AID is there. In the fight against HIV, in the fight to protect the Uyghur population in China, in the fight to protect refugees, in the fight to make sure that there's food security everywhere. AID is there. It is the lead development agency in the world. And no one elected Elon Musk to dismantle it. We are going to fight in every way we can. In the courts, in public opinion, with the bully pulpit, in the halls of Congress, and here at AID itself.
Well, the United Nations is obviously concerned about the impact that growing trade restriction measures can have on the global economy. U.S. spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric said this is especially true in developing countries and in places where there are vulnerable populations. He notes some of the pause on U.S. foreign aid is having immediate impact on U.S. operations in beneficiary countries.
We are in touch with our various agencies on the ground. Some of this is having immediate impact on life-saving activities. I mean, as you know, the U.S. has been extremely generous to our humanitarian programs all over the world. I think the figure for 2024 is that the U.S. contributed 47% of the global humanitarian appeal, which amounts up to about $14 billion. There's obviously a lot of U.S. participation in development issues. We are trying to kind of get some more granular examples of the impact to be able to share with you.
The Trump administration's latest move to lock out U.S. Agency for International Development workers from their headquarters in Washington, D.C. could come at the cost of the U.S. position in the world. A Washington analyst said the U.S. influence and standing around the world could easily be diminished by the closure of the agency, which distributes billions of dollars of humanitarian aid around the globe. He's also curious as to why it would be a target for closure by the cost-cutting measures of the U.S. government.
In the last recorded year, USAID managed about $40 billion in U.S. foreign assistance, and the total of U.S. foreign assistance hovers around $60 billion. All of that is relatively small in terms of the U.S. budget. It is less than 1/100th of the U.S. budget. So the U.S. is actually currently involved in an intense and intensifying competition, a geostrategic competition largely with China, but also with other adversaries around the world. And the U.S. is vying for partnerships with developing countries around the world. So by taking these steps, these drastic, draconian steps with regard to U.S. foreign aid, it actually could have the effect of ceding the battleground or ceding the playing ground, if you will. And others will very enthusiastically fill that void. And the U.S. influence and standing around the world could easily be diminished by this. And a lot of lives will be impacted very quickly, already immediately, by these freezes on U.S. foreign aid.
U.S. President Donald Trump not yet done signing controversial executive orders. His latest EO will create a sovereign wealth fund within 90 days. Trump provided new details about how the fund would operate, but he suggested it could potentially be used to buy Chinese app TikTok.
So other countries have sovereign wealth funds, and they're much smaller countries, and they're not the United States. We have tremendous potential in this country, tremendous. You're seeing that, what's happened just in a short period of time. And as an example, TikTok, we're going to be doing something perhaps with TikTok, and perhaps not. If we make the right deal, we'll do it, otherwise we won't. But I have the right to do that, and we might put that in the sovereign wealth fund, whatever we make, or if we do a partnership with very wealthy people, a lot of options, but we could put that as an example in the fund, and we have a lot of other things that we could put in the fund. And
TikTok's fate has been up in the air in the U.S. since a law requiring its Chinese owner ByteDance to either sell it on national security grounds or face a ban that took effect on January 19th. But Trump has signed an EO delaying the law's enforcement by 75 days. More business and economy news from around the country in a moment. Newsfeed Business will be back. Stay with us on BIC. Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey.
We empower.
This country deserves a real choice in the next election.
We motivate.
Do not invest money that you're not able to afford to lose.
Changes that are vital.
We're monitoring the sale of these products online.
Follow the Money with Raine Musñgi.
Keep it here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Always on top.
Bawat anggulo ng bawat issue.
Nagsagawa ng mock polls ang Commission on Elections sa 30 barangay sa bansa kaninang umaga.
Bawat detalye ng mga napapanahong pangyayari.
Pinaiimbestigahan sa Kamara ang hindi pa rin nababayarang reimbursements ng mga ospital sa PhilHealth.
Tuloy-tuloy na ihahatid kahit hanggang Sabado at Linggo.
At yan ang ating weekend agenda ngayong Sabado. Ako si George Cahiles. Sa bawat issue may anggulo at ang balita may agenda.
Welcome back to Newsfeed Business. The Supreme Court is hearing today the oral arguments on petitions on the transfer of 89.9 billion pesos in unused funds from the PhilHealth or Philippine Insurance Corporation. Let's get details from our correspondent Hannah Teo joins us on the line. Hannah, go ahead.
Raine, the future of 89.9 billion in PhilHealth funds is at stake as the Supreme Court hears oral arguments on whether the government can transfer these funds to the National Treasury. At exactly 2 p.m. today, the Supreme Court began hearing the consolidated petitions filed by One Sambayan Coalition, Senator Coco Pimentel, and Bayan Muna. Present at the hearing are Supreme Court justices, representatives from the Department of Finance and PhilHealth, and legal counsels from both sides, all set to debate the legality of a circular of the Finance Department. This directive ordered the transfer of excess funds from government-owned and controlled corporations, including PhilHealth, to the National Treasury. Before the argument started inside the session hall of the SC, protesters gathered along Padre Faura. Members of Bayan Muna demanded that PhilHealth funds remain with the insurer and be used to improve health services. As the controversy over PhilHealth funds persists, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. appointed Dr. Edwin Mercado as the new president and CEO of the agency, replacing Emmanuel Ledesma Jr. Mercado is a U.S.-trained orthopedic surgeon with 35 years of experience in hospital administration. He graduated from the University of the Philippines College of Medicine in 1987 and earned a Master of Medical Sciences in Global Health Delivery from Harvard Medical School in 2023. Senate President Cheese Escudero reminds the new leadership of PhilHealth that the benefits Filipinos receive should not be based on the agency's convenience. He expects that the shortcomings of the previous administration will not be repeated and that PhilHealth will provide more efficient service to the public.
Sa mahabang panahon, hindi nito ginawa at tinugunan ang pangunahing pangailangan sa kalusugan ng ating mga kababayan.
Senator Grace Poe also stressed that the new PhilHealth leadership must ensure that members truly feel the impact of the healthcare system, especially now that they are paying higher premium contributions. She also urged the new management to pay the agency's outstanding obligations to hospitals and health workers to ensure effective public service. Back to you, Raine.
Thank you so much for that report, Hannah T. Philippine factory activity expanded at a slower pace of 52.3 in January. That's according to the latest Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, of S&P Global. This is lower than the 54.3 recorded in December. PMI reading below 50 marks a contraction in the manufacturing sector, while 50 marks an expansion. S&P says this is due to the weaker growth of output despite strong improvement in demand. Group Federation of Free Farmers, or FFF, slammed government's dubious basis for declaring food security emergency. FFF National Manager Raul Montemayor tells Bilyonaryo News Channel's Business 360 they do not object the decision, but insisted it should have been carefully studied.
In their press statement, they said there was a spike in prices in 2023. That was more than a year ago. And that is the basis for declaring the emergency now in 2025. So parang antagal na pala yung emergency, ngayon lang sila nag-declare. No? So what is now the formula that they adopted in coming to this conclusion? Because that formula will become the basis for declaring future emergencies. So in the future, can they again declare an emergency based on prices 2 years, 3 years ago? No. Yun ang medyo questionable dyan. Although we are not questioning their intent to bring down rice prices. I think it's about time that we did something about that. But again, the basis for declaring an emergency, which is the legal basis for unloading NFA stocks, yan ang medyo questionable.
Montemayor believes the Philippine government did not exhaust all efforts to bring down rice prices before declaring a food security emergency.
There is one glaring thing that they have not done. They have not run after the profiteers. No? And it's very clear that when they reduced the tariffs in July last year from 35% to 15%, the prices of rice should have gone down by 6 to 7 pesos per kilo. Kasi yun yung reduction in the tariff that importers have to pay. But the prices did not go down in the retail side. So that 7 pesos remained in the hands of importers, wholesalers, and maybe retailers. But up to now, since July last year, they have not pinpointed who is the one who took advantage. No? And they are now trying to solve it by sort of inventing an emergency so that they will have the legal basis to release NFA rice, but they are letting these profiteers go scot-free.
Philippine shares closing in positive territory for the second straight day. Traders credit a technical bounce for the jump. The PSE index ended Tuesday higher by more than 3% to close at 60.89, finishing the day as the best performer in Asia. All sectoral indices ended in the green, with services rising the most by nearly 5%. Advancers also outpaced decliners, 124 to 61. Value turnover totaled 7.4 billion pesos. Among the day's most active stocks, only China Bank ended in the red, while ITCSI rose the most at almost 8%. Meanwhile, at the foreign exchange market, the peso is currently trading at 58.35 to the US dollar, stronger than Monday's close at 58.66 after US President Donald Trump delayed slapping tariffs on Mexico and Canada. And that's a wrap for today's Newsfeed Business. Thank you so much for making us your daily source of financial insights. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News channel. Follow the Money is next at 4:30. See you then.